Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am really excited to start this cars playlist. I'm so excited to walk you through the cars as I enjoy playing all these logic games on car section. And then as the name suggests, car stands for critical analysis and reasoning section, right? So it's not really just reading comprehension. There are a lot of logic that you have to dig deep into, okay? All right, so today we're gonna read a passage deeply, actively, and then we're going to do a couple questions, and then they're pretty overwhelming questions that I hope that won't overwhelm you, but I'm pretty sure you will definitely learn something from this. Keep watching till the end, okay? All right, so let's read the passage. Not only are the rich getting relatively richer, but there are relatively fewer Americans clustered in the middle of the income distribution. Okay, so right off the bat, I think this passage is going to be some economic passage talking about income distribution maybe. Then I scroll all the way down to my passage to see what is the title of the passage. And it says the end of equality. So I assume that this passage is going to tell me how this is an end of equality regards to income distribution. That's my assumption. I don't know. I'll just keep reading, and as I keep reading, I'll try to figure out the main idea, the main purpose of this passage, okay? All right, some studies show that more people left the middle because they joined affluent than because their incomes went down. Okay, this is telling me the income distribution is shifting because some people moved from middle to the upper higher, okay? Some studies show that more Americans went down than up. Okay, fine, up is and down, okay? Cool, so not too much more information in this first paragraph. I'll move on to the second paragraph. For decades after World War II, guidance counselors told high schoolers that without a college education, they'd be sunk. And for decades, the guidance counselors were wrong. Okay, college education, right? College education, does it really benefit or not? We're going to keep reading. In the 60s and early 70s, the economic advantage of a college degree actually diminished. That's what it says, that, okay, the guidance counselors were wrong, okay? Because this advantage is really not that big, right? They won't be sunk if they don't have a college degree, right? It's just that economic advantage actually diminished, okay? In 1973, 30-year-old man with 4 years of college made on average just 15% more than 30-year-old men who only had high school degrees. Okay, makes sense. The advantage is diminishing. But then the advantage of the college educated grew rapidly until by 1986, the gap in earnings had widened to 49%. Okay, so the world the guidance counselors warned us about has finally arrived. Okay, perfect. They warned us if you don't have a college degree, you'd be sunk. But the advantage was really just 15%. It's not too much until it got widened to 49%. So finally, the reality they warned us is coming true. Okay. The ability of the skilled and educated to make relatively more money is one major source of inequality. This is the buzzword, right? This is what I see in the title of the passage, the end of equality. So that basically the end of equality means a lot of inequality, right? So this is one major source of inequality, okay? All right, I don't know if the rest of the passage gonna expand on this source of inequality or if it's going to give me more sources of inequality. I don't know, okay? But I'm just actively thinking and reading, assuming, guessing, so that it kind of guides my logic as I read, okay? This is called active reading. You don't just read it. You do absorb the information. You do look at the structure. You do figure out what is each paragraph tells you, and then what is the whole passage tells you. What is the main purpose and idea of this passage, okay? Actively read it. Okay, let's keep actively read it. A second often cited source. A second often cited source is demographics. Okay, so now I'm pretty sure this other paragraph is talking about another source of inequality, I assume. So this is really the first major source of inequality, right? Being what? Being somebody have a college degree, somebody don't. And then the second one is demographic. What about demographic? The flood of baby boomers into the labor market. Okay, that makes sense. Baby boomers, a lot of people enter the job market, right? The advent of the boomers produced a natural bulge at the lower end of the wage scale. Okay, a lot of them are on the lower end of the wage scale, right? Worse, as these boomers competed with each other for entry-level work, they bid down entry-level wages, a phenomenon called crowding. Okay, I'm highlighting this because I'm guessing, what if they ask me, what does crowding in paragraph 3 explicitly refer to, right? Explain it. Then I know where to find this terminology. And then I also know that, okay, it basically refers to the baby boomers. They want to fight for these entry-level works, and then in order to fight for these entry-level works, they bid down, they decreased their entry-level wage demand, right? That's the phenomenon called crowding, okay? All right, let's keep reading. Between 1973 and 1987, the real adjusted for inflation, the real incomes of full-time young workers fell, while the incomes of older workers rose. Unskilled younger workers took an especially big hit. Okay, I mean, that makes sense. That's a result of crowding and also a lot of people rushing to the low end of the wage scale, right? It all makes sense. It's just some elaboration. Okay, cool. And then I don't know what next paragraph is going to talk about. I'm ready for the third source, but let's see what the next paragraph talks about. The next paragraph talks about the demographic explanation is supposed to be reassuring on the theory that income differences caused by the baby boom will cure themselves over time. The only problem is that it isn't happening. Boomers started hitting their mid-30s in 1980. Okay, so this is really not a new source of inequality, as I guessed, right? It's just an expansion of last paragraph saying that, okay, we think this source is going to come to an end. Instead, it didn't, right? Until the 1980s, there's still a lot of inequality. And the baby boomers, they're already not the young workers. They are hitting their mid-30s, okay? So cool. It's just an expansion of the second source of inequality, okay? I'm still like keeping reminding myself the structure, the logic flow of the passage. Okay, let's read the last 3 paragraphs. Okay, so the last 3 paragraphs says several other factors. Okay, cool. I think this paragraph is starting to telling me the third or even more sources of inequality. Okay, let's see. Several other factors are probably contributing to the growing inequality. Okay, perfect. What I was thinking. One is what? One is the trend toward 2 incomes. Okay, so this is the third one. The trend toward 2 incomes. What about 2 incomes? What do 2 incomes do? Most families, about 60% now, get by on 2 incomes. Okay, they have 2 incomes. Those stuck with only 1 income are going to do relatively worse. Okay, makes sense. To some extent, the new great divide is between the life 1 income can buy and the life 2 incomes can buy. Okay, perfect. This is a straightforward explanation about how 2 incomes can create this division. Okay, it's very straightforward. Okay, the next paragraph. Another factor. Okay, so here I see another factor. Right away, I'm gonna put 4. Okay, I don't know what it is yet, but I know this paragraph starts with the 4th, another factor that's gonna contribute to income inequality, right? Okay, another factor is the ominous trend toward assortative mating, okay? Assortative mating, I don't know what does that mean, and I kept reading. Marrying someone in your own income class. Okay, that makes sense. Take 2 single people, one a lawyer making $60,000 and the other a clerk making $20,000. If they choose their mates at random, it probably won't increase the gap between their 2 double earner families. But what if the $60,000 lawyer marries another $60,000 lawyer and the $20,000 clerk marries a $20,000 clerk? Then the difference in their incomes suddenly becomes the difference between $120,000 and $40,000. And the $120,000 couple really leaves a $20,000 single earner family in the dust. That makes sense. That's what assortative mating means. Basically, you marry the people at your level, right? Okay. And then it says, although this trend is still masked in the income statistics by the low average of women. So this low average woman is really a mask, right? it is obvious that something like this is in fact happening. So basically, this is saying that the vast majority of the paragraph is saying that assortative mating is causing more inequality, right? But sometimes people think it's not because of assortative mating. Sometimes people think it's the low average wage of women that's causing this inequality, right? So the author thinks that the low income wage of women is not a real source. It's just a mask, okay? All right. Finally, okay, we're at our final paragraph. Finally, there are trends that might affect the distribution of wealth, okay? Finally, there are trends that might affect. Okay, so is that my the last source that can contribute to the inequality? There are trends that might affect distribution of wealth. Yeah, I'll say yeah, because isn't distribution of wealth, distribution of income, the whole theme of the paragraph, right? So I would say yeah. But what is it? It is, if you bought your house before, say 1973, you paid a nice, low fixed mortgage and benefited from the average 120% increase in the value of the average home between 1973 and 1980. Oh, okay. So the last source is you bought your house at the right time, right? Okay. But someone who waited until 1981 got socked with high mortgage rates and missed the boat on appreciation. Two people might have identical income, but because of the timing of their house purchases, they would wind up with very unequal wealth. Okay, this confirms that this last source, it is a source of inequality of income, right? Okay, so the structure of this whole paragraph is really straightforward, okay? It's not like talking about things in a weird way. It's the logic flow is clear, right? First paragraph, it raised the problem of this changing of income distribution. And then the second paragraphs right away started to talk about the major source of inequality. Being number one is college education, right? Is causing this inequality. And then the third paragraph is about the second source of inequality, being the baby boomer doing this and that, XYZ that was caused, right? And then an extra paragraph that elaborates on the second source of inequality. And then the last three paragraphs are just three different sources that can cause inequality, okay? Very straightforward. All the sources we talked about in these paragraphs are toward in one direction, saying this is the end of equality, means all of this is causing inequality, right? Except in our second to last paragraph, there's a contrasting of idea between assortative mating versus low average wages, right? The author thinks it's assortative mating that's causing inequality, but this fact is masked by low average wage of women. So you could infer that some other voices might think, oh, it's actually the low average wage of women that's causing inequality. But the author, what does the author think? The author thinks it's assortative mating, okay? All right, so that is the passage. And then combine everything, every paragraph, combine all the logics we had when we read this passage. We know that the main purpose is just really like the title suggests, that there's an end of equality, right? There are so many sources that's towarding inequality, okay? So we're lucky that this passage has a really straightforward title. But even if we never saw this title, we can really infer. See, the vast majority of the passage, right? I mean, almost the whole passage is talking about how unequal it is due to XYZ, okay? All right, so now let's dive into the questions, okay? All right, so the first question says, I'll read it all the options, and then I'll let you pick your answer, and then we'll go through, okay? Some critiques contend that American education has not adapted rapidly enough to changes in the world economy over the last few decades and has been preparing students for a diminishing pool of jobs. What evidence cited in the passage provides the strongest support for this thesis? A says, the earning disadvantage suffered by non-college educated 30-year-old males in 1973. B says, the earnings advantage enjoyed by college educated 30-year-old males in 1986. And C says, the the shrinking of the middle class relative to the lower class during the 1970s and 1980s. And D says the shrinking of the real incomes of young workers during the 1970s and 1980s. You're like, holy cow, what is that, right? Okay, it's okay. I'll give you just 5 seconds, or you can pause the video and take as long as you need. I'll give you 5 seconds to pick the best answer, okay? All right, there's 5 seconds. Okay, so what do you think? Okay, before we start to pick the right answer, let's just reread the question. This is a long question stem, right? We want to know what do we get from the question first. We want to sort out our logic. We want to have a clear, crystal clear logic first, okay? And then we dive into the answer choices, okay? So, okay, let's reread it. Some critics contended that American education has not adapted rapidly enough to changes in the world economy over the last few decades. Okay, so and whatever. So basically, the first part of this sentence. Okay, before and, the first part of sentence is telling me what? It's telling me American education is bad, right? I simplified it. You're telling me, oh, not adapted rapidly enough to changes in the world economy over the last few decades, blah, blah, blah. So this is all sounding fancy and complicated. But the logic is easy. The logic is saying American education is failing. It's not good, it's bad, right? So I want my wording to be as easy as possible because I'm focusing on the logic, okay? So I don't bother you use the word adapted rapidly. I'll just say American education is bad, okay? All right, and then there's another part of this question. Let's keep reading. And what? And has been preparing students for a diminishing pool of jobs, okay? So this second part of this question stem is telling me what? It's telling me there's less jobs, okay? That's all it's about, okay? Less jobs for the young graduates, right? Because it's not for like super old people, like, right? It's for people who are graduated, because only young people having less job indicating that American education is bad. They're fresh off the school boat, right? Okay. All right, so the question is asking, what evidence cited in the passage? Okay, I need to find something that's cited in the passage, which means what? A, B, C, D. They all have to be in the passage, okay? You can't relate your own knowledge or something you imagined, okay? All right, so what evidence cited in the passage provides the strongest support for this thesis? What is this complicated thesis? It is just saying 1 or 2, right? That's the thesis. It's just what I listed here. Well, A, B, C, D. Which one is from the passage, cited in the passage, as well as supports 1, American education is bad. 2, less jobs for young people. Okay? That's it. So let's read A, B, C, D. A says the earning disadvantage suffered by non-college educated 30-year-old males in 1973. Okay, is it from the passage? Yes, it is. The passage talked about the disadvantage suffered by the non-college graduated, right? That's the first source of inequality that we summarized, right? Okay, so it is from the passage, the first criteria that A meets. But the second criteria is A has to align with the logic 1 and logic 2, right? And then logic 1 says American education is bad, right? But what does A say? A is saying college education is good because the non-college educated, they had a disadvantage that they suffered, right? So A is said American college is good. So isn't that the opposite logic as my logic? My logic 1 that I inferred from my question stem, right? American education is bad. It's not adapted rapidly enough. So A is the opposite of the logic in a question stem. I don't like it, okay? I mean, I'll just keep reading, but I don't like A, okay? And then B. B says what? B says the earnings advantage enjoyed by college-educated 30-year-old males in 1986. Yeah, it is talked about in the passage, right? It's not outside information. It was cited in the passage. Remember, we said, okay, in the beginning, the advantage was actually diminished. It was just 15%, and then it got widened to 49%. So there's always an advantage, right? Smaller advantage from the first in the beginning, and then later larger advantage. So it is cited from the passage, but also the logic of this choice B is saying that the college educated, they have some sort of advantage. So this is also saying what? College is good. Right? College is good. It's just like A. They're both saying, see, college is good. The non-college educated, they had a disadvantage. The college educated, they had an advantage. So college is so good. It doesn't, both of them, they don't align with my logic 1 here. Okay? All right. What does C say? C says, the shrinking of the middle class relative to the lower class during the 1970s and 1980s. Okay, I mean, I vaguely remember that from the first paragraph, the very beginning of the passage that talks about the flow of the income distribution. But does it explicitly say that it's the middle class that moving to the lower class? Okay, let's see, okay? So let's read it again. So, income distribution. Some studies show that more people left. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have read it from the get-go. Okay, let's just read it from the get-go. Not only are the richer getting relatively richer, but there are relatively fewer Americans clustered in the middle of the income distribution. Some studies show that more people left the middle because they enjoyed the affluent than because their incomes went down. Some studies show that more Americans went down and up. Okay, went down then up. Okay, so the first part is saying that Americans they go from the middle class to the higher upper class. But also some studies show that some more Americans went down then up. But went down then up is went where down to where up? Is from the high class to middle class, or from the like a middle class to low class, right? So I mean C is kind of talked about, cited in the passage, but it's not explicitly mentioned in the class that the income distribution flows from the middle class to the lower class, okay? So I feel fuzzy about this part if the passage really talked about this, but it's okay. I can also think about the two logics that I inferred from the question stem. I want to ask myself, do logic 1 and logic 2, American education is bad, less job for young people, does that relate to the shrinking of the middle class relative to the lower class during the blah, blah, blah? Right? The shrinking of the middle class relative to the lower class, okay? I mean, C is saying, okay, more shrink of the low class, right? I mean, I don't know how I mean, this is really fuzzy, but I don't see the relation between choice C and the two logics from the question stem. So, I mean, at this point, I feel really uneasy, okay? It's okay. We all feel that. I'll just keep reading D, okay? See what new ideas D brought up, okay? So D says, the shrinking of the real incomes of young workers during the 1970s and 1980s. Okay, the passage did talk about that. Remember the crowding, right? Because of crowding and the bulge at the lower end of the wage scale that causes the shrinking of the young people are making less income, right? So this is saying that young people are making less income during this period of time. Okay, so why do they make less income? Because more people, the baby boomers, more people are coming to the job market, right? So, I mean, this really means that less job for the young graduates, so that there's shrinking of real income of young workers, right? So, is it caused by American education? I mean, compared to C, I would think D is more related to the two logics, right? Because D is really talking about the shrink of the income of young workers. And then young workers, they are out of the school recently, right? They just got out of school recently. This really aligns with what the question stem says. American education did not adapt rapidly enough, right, to the change of the world, and then they didn't prepare students enough, right, so that the students are really facing this less job situation, right? So I would think D really relates to C better. So it doesn't matter that I just gotta stop struggling with C, okay? So I will pick D as my answer with confidence, okay? So that's about it, okay? We can move on to the next question. If the low average wages of women have masked the economic results of a tendency toward assortative mating, which of the following statement is most likely to be true? A says the elimination of gender discrimination would magnify income inequality among assortatively mated couples. B says as women's average wages rise, the earnings advantage of assortatively mated couples over randomly mated ones will grow. And C says randomly mated couples suffer disproportionately from the low average wages of women. And D says gender discrimination has contributed to income inequality among two-income couples. Okay, same drill, 5 seconds. There you go. Alrighty, let's dive into this, okay? All right, so this question is also an overwhelming one, okay? There's a lot of logics you have to sort out, okay? So let's read it. If the low average wage of women has masked the economic results of a tendency toward assortative mating. Okay, so in the passage, what did the author say about assortative mating, right? So that this is the fourth source of inequality. So the author thinks assortative mating is one of the sources of inequality, right? Whereas this low average wage of women is just a mask, right? It's hiding the effect that the assortative mating is causing, which is inequality, okay? So I need to sort out my own logic, keep it straight, okay? So the first thing I know is, logic 1 is assortative mating causes what? Inequality, right? I stick to the main idea of the passage, okay? Inequality. And then the second logic is the low average wage of women, does that really cause inequality? No, it inhibits, if you will. You can tell how much I love the biochemistry pathway that I literally used the sign and I used the word inhibition. Okay, anyways, so that's the logic, right? The author and the question stem, they're both saying that, okay, assortative mating is causing inequality. It's one of the sources of inequality. But low wage of women is just something, it's just a mask. It's just a mask. It's not really causing inequality. It's assortative mating that's causing inequality, right? So that is the logic I need to have, right? If you don't establish a strong logic, you're not affirmative about your thinking, your logic, then those choices are designed to confuse you, to mess up your logic, right? But so write it down, especially when you're doing practice. I mean, on the real deal, you want to do all this in your head because you only have 10 minutes for each passage and 1 minute for each question. So you don't have time to do all the analysis we're doing here. But here, I'm just tutoring you how to think the AMC, the MCAT way, right? So as you practice, you can definitely write things down. Take as long as you need, right? Okay. So this is the logic I'm writing down, okay? Now I'm going to read the answer choices, okay? A says the elimination of gender discrimination, okay? The elimination of gender discrimination is basically I'm eliminating this, right? I'm eliminating low wage of the woman equals to the elimination of gender discrimination. Would magnify income inequality among blah, blah, blah. Okay, so if I get rid of this, then I'll get rid of this inhibition sign. So basically, my logic aligns with choice A, right? My logic is getting rid of low wage of women would also cause inequality because there's the existence of assortative mating, right? So that's why I got rid of this inhibition sign. So A basically says what I thought. A confirms my confident logic, okay? So I'll keep reading, okay? I like it so far, but let's just keep reading. B says, as women's average wage rises, okay, that's the same thing as crossing this out. What does it say? The earnings advantage of assortative mated couple over randomly mated ones will grow. Okay, so I mean, I'm confident about A is talking about getting rid of this still causes inequality, could also even magnify the inequality. But B, I mean, the earning advantage of assorted mated couple does the inequality necessarily mean that increasing the assortative mated couple's income, right? I mean, B looks like a really good answer. And then I, like when during MCAT, if I get tired, I'm exhausted, I want to get it down, I may really want to choose B. I may really want to think, okay, B is also a pretty nice answer, right? So I will tell you why B is actually not the best answer, okay? Okay, B says the earning advantage of assorted mated couple. I mean, the passage never explicitly say that assorted couple has some advantage over randomly mated couple. The passage only says the assortative mating can cause inequality, right? So can cause inequality. So for example, here I have two groups, assortatively mated and then randomly mated, okay? So this is assortatively mated, this is randomly mated. So let's say the man's wage is 10,000 and the woman is also making 10,000, right? That's assortative mated according to the definition of the paragraph, right? And then randomly mated, I see the man is making 10,000 and then the woman is making 100,000, right? And then let's get rid of the part that's gender. Let's just raise, as the question then says, let's raise the woman's wage, okay? So I'm gonna raise it now. So I am gonna raise it to 12,000, okay? And then I'm also gonna add $2,000 here, okay? All right, so now I have raised their wage, okay? And then this couple makes what? 32. And this couple makes, okay. Do you think in this case, the randomly mated couple are suffering? Do you think that after I raise the women's wage, the assortative mated couple has an advantage? No, right? Once again, the passage says that assortative mating is a source of inequality, but it doesn't necessarily say there's earning advantage of the assortative mated couple over the randomly mated ones, okay? Stick to your main idea. Stick to logic 1 and 2. Assortative mating can be a source of inequality, can cause inequality, but it doesn't necessarily give assortative married couple an advantage, okay? So I would say B is really okay? And then another reason that I like A is like A has this buzzword inequality, right? In the passage title. And then I always stick to the main idea as I read every paragraph. I was always thinking if it is a source of inequality, aka the end of equality, right? So I like this buzzword, right? This is really broader. This is broader than saying, okay, it's just earning an advantage. They don't equal to each other. This inequality is a bigger umbrella. It's a more overarching idea than this necessarily earning an advantage of a assortatively mated couple, okay? All right, so now let's read C, okay? C says, randomly mated couples suffer disproportionately from the low average wages of women. No, not necessarily, right? This very same example here tells you that this is too definitive in some sense, okay? So I'm gonna cross out C. And then D says, gender discrimination has contributed to income equality among two income couples. This is very obviously just the opposite of my logic A, right? My logic A, and then the author's, because my logic, according to author's logic, I'm just not using my outside knowledge, not I think assortative mating. It's the author in a passage that he or she thinks assortative mating is a source of inequality. So this is really the very important sub paragraph idea, right? So that D is the opposite of this important logic that we inferred. So I will definitely cross out D, and then I pick A as my best answer, okay? So these are overwhelming questions. If you have any more questions that you want me to clarify, please comment down below, okay? Thank you.